Another story I'm reminded of and turn there is Daniel chapter 4. Daniel chapter 4 about the great king Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 4 verse 28. And it says, all this came upon the king of Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he walked in the palace of kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom? By the might of whose power? Of my own power, and for the honor of my majesty. Don't get me wrong, King Nebuchadnezzar had every right to think this. At the time, he was the greatest king to be on the planet of the earth. And I imagine one day as he's maybe walking along the walls of his city, looking out over the vast cities that he had command over, looking at his armies maybe training in the fields, thinking, I've made it. All this that I have done by my own power, I have done it by my own hand. But watch what it says in verse 31 of Daniel chapter 4. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. Thou shalt make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claw. Imagine one of the greatest men to walk on the planet of the earth. I imagine he would have been wearing that rich purple color, maybe a red cape, a solid gold crown on his head with countless jewels that were worth maybe millions of dollars. And the Bible says that as the words were in his mouth, as Nebuchadnezzar was saying, I have done this with my great power, the Lord humbled him. He went from being the greatest person to walk the planet in an instant to like a cow in the field. He went from standing tall to maybe having a hunchback, walking on all fours. He went from having skin to having, it says, as feathers like an eagle that were wet like the dew. He went from being the greatest man to a cow. I'm assuming it was a cow. But you get the idea. He went from being the greatest person to a beast of the field. These stories affirm for us the power of weakness. As long as these great men had recognized their weakness, God would have kept them. See, God allowed for King Nebuchadnezzar to reach where he was. God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar to be the greatest person that ever walked the face of the planet. And it says in the final verses of Daniel chapter 4, says, and at the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High. And I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And then look with me in verse 37 of Daniel chapter 4. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor who? Wasn't himself. But he says that he praise and honor the King of heaven. All whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to obey. It was only then that God restored King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar went from saying, hey, it was all about me, it's all about my power. In an instant, God humbled him, and that forced him to then say, hey, it's nothing about me, but it's all about God. Don't fall in love with yourself, church. Don't fall in love with your accomplishments just as King Uzziah and King Nebuchadnezzar did. Humble yourself, for it is better to be humble than to be humbled.